any chance I could start sometime soon. I think it's pretty undeniable that the new Sony Alpha 1 is insane, much like this dog. The specs of it are frankly ludicrous and far exceeding anything that we've ever seen before. However, there is an aspect to it that I hadn't actually considered until I'd read a post on Sony Alpha Rumors last night. Now, obviously, a lot of the things that get posted on SAR have to be taken with a pinch of salt. This particular post was entitled New Sony A1 Real Life Hands-On Report with Images. Now, it's a translation from a Japanese site, so straight away, there's obviously the notion that some of the things being mentioned aren't being translated entirely accurately. A lot of the key points are things like the processors being used, and a lot of the points are talking about the processing unit and the design of the sensor, etc. But then some of them refer to the autofocus capabilities. And there's a few here. One says, some AFC lenses cannot catch up. The main FE lens supports 30 frames a second, but the one with a large lens drive system may have up to 20 or 15 frames. Lenses of other companies are full of 15 frames due to the actuator. Please use a genuine lens. That's obviously a very rough translation, but what it sounds like it's saying is third-party lenses won't be able to manage more than 15 frames a second on the A1. Now, that's not saying adapted lenses, that's saying third-party, which could mean the Tamron E-mount lenses or any E-mount lens made by another manufacturer. They're saying that the lens and the camera won't be able to work quickly enough to achieve 30 frames a second, and you'll be limited to 15. But even the genuine Sony lenses, there's going to be, by the sounds of it, at least some that are just not quick enough to keep up with 30 frames a second drive speed. Now, that's not that much of a surprise when you consider technically Sony FE lenses still include everything way back from the NEX series. So the 28mm f2 or the 50mm f1.8, they're pretty old lenses. That's not that much of a surprise that they won't be able to manage close to 30 frames a second. Now, it's worth bearing in mind that this will only be a limitation when shooting continuous autofocus. So if you're in single shot or manual focus, then the speed of the camera won't be hindered. The problem arises that every time the camera's trying to shoot in continuous autofocus, it's having to take a picture, adjust the focus, take a picture, adjust the focus, take a picture, adjust the focus, take a picture. And the lens is doing the same thing. It's racking focus when the camera's trying to acquire focus. It then needs to stop while the camera takes the picture, then re-rack focus and take the picture, and then re-rack focus, stop to take the picture, and so on and so forth. So the drive system and the circuitry within the lens needs to be quick enough to keep up with the camera. You will have that in situations. That's why all manufacturers always say a camera's shooting speed is up to a certain number of seconds, because that's based on idealistic situations. The camera's usually going to regulate its speed, especially if you've got the autofocus settings set to prioritize autofocus or a balanced approach rather than just focused on speed. Then if the subject's not in focus, the camera's going to hesitate taking the picture. So you're not always going to get the maximum potential speed of your camera. Then obviously, if you're shooting in really good light, the camera's autofocus system can react very quickly, whereas if you're shooting in lower light, it's going to be a bit more hesitant. So it's always up to a certain number of frames. But I hadn't considered 30 frames a second is nuts. It's 50% faster than the A9 series and 3 times faster than anything the A7 series can shoot. I mean, obviously, it's an inevitability that you have a camera that's shooting that fast. You need the lenses to have the speed to back it up. Otherwise, it's like putting a jockey on a merry-go-round. But firstly, I am surprised that they're saying that third-party lenses won't be able to get above, did he say 15 frames a second? Because the Tamron lenses, for example, like they're 70 to 180, the AF drive in that seems pretty damn quick. You know, maybe not quite 30 frames a second sustainable, but certainly more than capable of doing 15 frames a second, presumably. But then it begs the question, where's the cutoff point going to be between what lenses are able to match the speed of the A1 and what lenses aren't? Because they've just said some FE lenses. There's no list of anything. We'll know more once actual copies of the A1 start getting out to reviewers and they can start testing them on the various different lenses. It's pretty safe to assume that the white G Master lenses are going to be fast enough to cope. The 100 to 400, the 400 and the 600 primes, they'll obviously be quick enough. It would be a bit pointless if they weren't, seeing as how they're the fastest lenses that they've got. I'd be surprised if the white G series lenses like the 200 to 600 and the 70 to 200 f4 aren't quick enough. Pretty much most with dual linear AF drives, I would say, should be quick enough. Maybe some of the prime G Master lenses like the 85 or the 135 might not be quick enough to keep up with it. Cheaper lenses like the 85-18 have pretty quick linear motors, but even that struggles to keep up with, like, me walking on an A7 III. So that's struggling to keep up with 8 and 10 frames a second. So it wouldn't surprise me to see that not be able to cope with 30 frames a second. So it's hardly a surprise that there will be lenses not quick enough to keep up with the A1, because there were a lot of lenses that weren't quick enough to keep up with the A9 and the A9 II. The big question that we don't know is, where is that cutoff point for lenses that are capable of achieving 30 frames a second? Which ones are only capable of doing 20 and which ones are stuck down at 15? So I think as long as the white lenses, the 70 to 200 to 200 to 600, the 100 to 400 and the big primes are able to get the performance out of the A1, most people should be quite happy. But I imagine there's going to be a lot of people pre-ordering the A1 for the speed of it who don't have those lenses. Either have older lenses, slower lenses, or third-party lenses, which seemingly can't actually get the performance out of it anyway. And the biggest question is, why are the third-party lenses limited to 15? Is it that the third-party lenses physically just aren't capable of doing more than 15 frames a second? Or is it that Sony have intentionally made it so the camera throttles itself back to 15 frames a second when it detects a third-party lens? But what do you think? Which lenses do you think will and won't be affected by these speed restrictions? Leave your thoughts and comments in the box down below. While you're down there, if you haven't already, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button, and then hopefully we'll see you in the next video.